Thank you everybody for joining. It is 12:35 on February 16th. This is the SVCE Audit Committee. A reminder that this meeting is being conducted in accordance with California Government Code Section 54953E in consideration of the coronavirus. Any members of the public who would like to make a public comment during the public comment period may do so by raising your virtual hand by pressing *9. We will call on you to make your public comment. That I will hand it over to our chair, Chair Makachuk.
Thank you. I will call the Silicon Valley Clean Energy Audit Committee meeting to order at 12:36 p.m. May we start with a roll call, please?
Yes, Chair Makachuk.
Present.
Director Mohan.
Here.
Committee Member Sangha.
Here.
Thank you. And I will note that currently Committee Member Lopez and Committee Member Srinivasan are absent, but we do have a quorum of the committee.
Thank you. We've got a quorum. We'll start with the public comment. Any member of the public may comment on anything relevant to Silicon Valley Clean Energy. If you would like to do so, please raise your virtual hand. Do we have any hands raised?
No hands raised.
No hands raised. At this point, I will close public comment and we'll move on to the consent calendar. We've got 2 items on the consent calendar. I'll start with public comment on the consent calendar. If any member of the public would like to make a comment, please raise your virtual hand. Are there any?
No hands raised, Chair.
Okay, I will close public comment on the consent calendar and I'll be looking for a motion. If anyone would like to pull an item on the consent calendar, you may do so. Otherwise, I'm looking for a motion.
I so move.
You're moving. We've got a motion to approve the consent calendar. We need a second.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. May we have a roll call, please? Roll call vote.
Yes, thank you. Chair Makachuk.
Aye.
Director Mohan.
Aye.
Committee Member Sangha. Committee Member Sangha.
Aye. Sorry.
Thank you. No worries. That motion carries with Directors Srinivasan and Lopez absent.
Thank you. With that, we'll move to our regular calendar, and it is 12:38, and I think that I know that one of the 2 members will be new, but Mr. Lopez, Member Lopez, was here last year. But I think that since there's 4, 8, 9, 10, 11 of us, we should continue. And I see that Mike has joined the Zoom, so that's a good thing. Amrit, go ahead, please.
Okay, so Andrea, if you can bring up the presentation, please. So I'll give a very brief overview of the committee. This is not a committee that meets that often, but it's a very important committee that helps us carry out an important function. So we do appreciate you being part of our committee. So welcome to our committee, and we'll advance some slides, Andrea. So thank you for being on our committee. Just a brief overview on the next slide. The main purpose of this committee, just as a reminder, most of you have finance backgrounds or are familiar, but the primary purpose of the committee is to oversee our external auditors. We have Kellen Gilbert here from Picente and Brinker, oversee the audit of SVC's financial statements. So, and just a few reminders, the auditors are working on behalf of the board to review management's work. The auditor will present a letter identifying any material weakness or deficiencies to the board, and a draft of that letter was attached in the package. And today we will ask the committee to recommend that the board receive the audit. We will be taking the results of the audit to the board in March. And per our financial policy, 6 months after the close of our fiscal year, we have to have our official financial report issued. And March will be that 6th month. Andrea, we'll go to the next slide, please. So this is your chance to discuss with the auditor any material risk weaknesses detected in internal controls, were there any restrictions in their scope of activity, and any recommendations that the auditor may make. You can assess the performance and independence of the auditor, and at the end we are asking that you vote to recommend that the board accept the results of the audit findings. And I also understand that Brian had an opportunity to meet with the external auditor, and he may report on that later on any findings or discussions that Brian may feel he want to discuss with the committee. We'll go to the next slide, Andrea. So in addition to financial audit, we also have IT audits that SVC conducts every year. We will also go through an overview of our IT audits. Kevin, our Deputy Director of Administrative Services, and Nick Zanato, our Manager of IT and Administrative Services. They will go through the IT presentation that was included in the package. So IT audit, we go through a security assessment. We make a lot of, there's some background noise from someone. I don't know where it's coming from. Anyways, we go through our IT audits every year. We have made tremendous improvement in our IT posture. Last year, we hired a virtual chief information security officer, and we engaged with our virtual CISO to conduct a security assessment that's very comprehensive and looks at the threat the agency is facing, such as those listed on the slide. The IT audit, this is something we have done almost since our inception, and we've incorporated it in part of our security assessment, and Kevin and Nick will go through that. The other audit I want to highlight is the CPUC mandated audit of our customer metadata. So we are in possession of customer metadata, so CPUC wants to ensure that we have appropriate controls and are compliance with CPUC policies as to how we handle that data. So we have a triennial audit. We did one last year. The next one is in 2025, but every year we have a compliance filing that we do with the CPUC, and we will do so again this year in April. Again, more details on this in the slides that Kevin and Nick will go over. Any questions on the high-level overview before I turn it over to Kellen to go through our financial audit findings?
What I'd like to do is just add to what you said about the role of the audit committee. Could you go back a slide, please? One more. I think it's important that we all understand that there's a finance and administration committee and there's an audit committee. And the finance and administration committee is kind of on the side where if you've got questions on the financial statements and an understanding of those, and the finance committee should have an understanding, and they get that every month, of the financial results, the unaudited results. But the audit committee is, the purpose is to ensure that the audit committee is confident in that the audit was performed appropriately and understand what the external auditor's opinion is. So it's kind of different. And I was on the finance and administration committee but I felt a little bit conflicted if I'm on the audit committee and the finance and administration committee. So that's why I did not be part of the finance and administration committee this year. I wanted to make sure that I was totally independent. And I also wanted to say that I'm still a licensed CPA in Canada, not in the United States and certainly not in California, but I have professional obligations as being a licensed CPA in Canada. And formally, I was what was called a chartered accountant in Canada, but then they changed it from chartered accountant to a CPA. So it would be similar to the United States. Anyways, I just wanted to underscore those items. And then as well, Amrit, you mentioned that I had a meeting with the auditors by myself, and that's kind of standard. I see an audit committee as being very independent, and you've got to have certain communications where management are not present, and you can't really do that through a closed session. So I did want to disclose that I had that conversation, and I asked a number of questions, all of which I received a satisfactory response. And then the final thing that I'd like to say for the committee as an introduction is that all the financial transaction processing and the creation of the financial statements is done by essentially a third party, and that's Mike Marr of Marr Accountancy, and he is on this call. So they SVCE, for lack of a better term, outsource the transaction processing and the accounting to Mike's firm, and then Mike's firm works for a number of different CCAs, and they do the accounting for a number of CCAs and prepare the financial statements. So I just wanted everyone to understand that, because it was a little confusing to me when I first joined SVCE, the finance and admin and the audit committee several years ago. So I thought I would explain that to everyone. And I was also hoping that we may have a couple other members join us, but I see we haven't yet. No. Okay.
I had a quick question about the accountancy firm. So does that mean that the the accounting reports are not prepared in-house at all?
That's correct. It's prepared by Mike Maher, who is present on this call.
Okay, and that's the norm in your environment?
Pretty much most of the CCAs that I know of, with the exception of one, maybe, it's an outsource. We're a small agency, and the accounting can be very complicated. And rather than build an accounting team in-house, it's more effective that we outsource this function.
Thank you.
Maybe Mike, you'd just like to spend a moment and outline the services that you provide for SVCE and other CCAs, and maybe in that time some other members will join us.
Yeah. So I'll just do a filibuster until somebody comes up. Yeah, and thank you, Director Megachek, for the introduction. You put it pretty well. So we're a CPA firm. We have a lot of experience with governmental accounting, both from running the finance and accounting side of things, but also a lot of experience doing audits, governmental audits. So pretty familiar with the space. We do work for a number of other CCAs up and down the state. So a lot of experience with this particular type of accounting. And while we would be considered the back office accounting department, we do relate constantly with Omrit and team. So they're part of the disbursements process. They're part of reviewing financial statement data, preparing treasury reports. If there are any complicated or unusual transactions, we discuss them and talk about how we're going to treat them. So there's a lot of interaction between our team and Omrit's team on a day-to-day basis. But yeah, at the end of the day, we are preparing the financial statements and get audited. So that's we do perform more of the back office function of it, but again, there's a lot of interaction between the both of us. And then with regards to this particular financial statement with the disclosures and all of that, again, the auditors are a separate, completely independent party. And so we feel in many ways they're auditing not just SVCE, but they're auditing me and my team. They're auditing us too. So we take a lot of pride with the preparation of those financial statements. Yeah, so I mean, it's kind of the high level of what we do. I don't know if more.
And then, I think that Vicente and Brinker, they also audit other CCAs that you do the accounting for. Could you just touch on that briefly?
Yeah, that's true. So Vicente and Brinker also has a lot of experience in the CCA world, so in governmental accounting in general. So there are a lot of mutual clients, if you will. So that works to Silicon Valley's benefit, in that the auditors don't have to relearn kind of niche industry. They do understand it pretty well, so they can hone their testing as required. But yeah, so we have a working relationship with them across many different CCAs. So a few different auditors who deal with CCAs, but I think Vicente definitely has the majority of the CCAs up and down the state also as their client.
Excellent. Thank you very much. With that, I'm sorry for interrupting, Omrit, but I just want to make sure that everyone understood the landscape and how it works. So
That was very important. Thank you, Brian, for clarifying all that. That was very useful. I think next, before we go to the auditors, Andrea, are we going to do the committee membership selection, chair, and first, or do we go?
Yes, correct. So
Okay.
we'll open this item for any public comment, and then we'll move on to item 3, which is the chair and vice chair selection.
So just a sec, sorry, I'm just going back to the okay, so yes, like to open public comment on the audit committee overview and discussion. If anyone from the public would like to speak, please raise your virtual hand and we will recognize you. I do not see any hands raised. Do you?
Nope, no hands raised, Chair.
Then I will close public comment on item 2, and we will move to item 3, which is selection of the 2023 SVCE Audit Committee Chair and the Vice Chair.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So as the title states, we're going to select our 2023 Chair and Vice Chair. This will be for a 1-year term or until the next year's chair and vice chair are selected. There are no term limits, and it is up to the committee to decide who will represent you as chair and vice chair. So with that, any discussion or nominations?
I will volunteer to chair the committee again.
I will second that.
Any other nominations? Hearing none, I think we will close the nominations and Do we have to do a roll call vote?
We could, and if I could have somebody other than you, Director Makachek, make the motion to appoint you as chair and have somebody second.
Oh, okay.
Okay. I move to nominate Director Makachuk as chair of the audit committee.
And I'll second that motion.
Thank you, Committee Member Sangha. Okay, and if there are no comments, I can go ahead and do a roll call vote for that. I will start with you, Director Mohan.
Aye.
Committee Member Sangha,
Aye.
Director Makachek.
Aye.
Thank you, and that moves unanimously with Director Makachek serving as the 2023 Audit Committee Chair.
All right, with that, I will remain chairing the meeting and go to nominations for vice chair. We've got 2 members that are in attendance and 2 other members. Would either of you like to nominate the other or someone else, or nominate yourself?
Since I'm a new member, I will yield to committee member Sheila Mohan. So I will make a motion to have her be the vice chair, if that's okay.
Sheila, do you accept?
I'm a new member as well, but I do accept.
All right, we've got a motion and an acceptance, and I will second the motion and close the nominations and second the motion. And with that, may we have a roll call vote, please?
Yes, thank you. Chair Makachek,
Aye.
Director Mohan,
Aye.
Committee Member Sangha.
Aye.
Thank you. That motion carries for Director Mohan to serve as the 2023 Audit Committee Vice Chair.
Congratulations, well done. Now we can go to item 4, which is receive the financial statement audit report from Vicente and Brinker and recommend the SVCE Board of Directors accept the audit findings. Go ahead, please.
All right. Thank you. So as previously mentioned, my name is Kellen Gilbert. I'm the lead audit partner from Vicente and Brinker performing the audit for Silicon Valley. If you don't mind going to the next slide, please. I have 14 years experience at Vicente and Brinker focusing on government entities and 16 years of experience overall. And Alejandra Schaefer is the engagement supervisor who assisted me in performing the audit. Next slide, please. At this point, the audit is near completion, and just to be more specific, near completion, it is 99% complete, basically waiting for this body's approval and 1 or 2 other minor formatting changes that were caught during our last round of quality control review. But essentially, our auditing procedures are complete. And at this point, I can assure you that we are issuing an unmodified opinion, meaning that the financial statements are free of material misstatement. And as also was mentioned earlier by the chair, we did send a draft of a letter and again can confirm that that will be the final letter. We did not identify any internal control deficiencies during the audit. Next slide, please. So, Brian, I really think you did a great job already talking about the relative roles and responsibilities. I'm just going to hit it one more time just because I do think it is really important. Basically, to reiterate that management is responsible for the financial statements. A lot of the public believes that because we are the auditors that we are responsible for the entire financial statement package, and that is inaccurate. Management is responsible for all the financial data within the financial statements. They're responsible for maintaining internal controls and compliance. We are responsible for providing our opinion on whether or not those financial statements are free of material misstatement. And we do that by what we call a risk-based approach, doing things considering the risk of material misstatement, considering internal controls over the financial statements. And then based on our risk assessment, we perform tests of year-end balances, and we read and review the financial statements for making sure that all the required notes, disclosures are there without bias, and that they're adequately presented. Next slide, please. So I previously mentioned we use what's called a risk-based approach in performing our audits. That's what is prescribed by the professional standards. It requires that we gain an understanding of the entity's operations, characteristics, practices, procedures, revenue streams, things like that. We can use our knowledge of similar entities, industries, and other professional guidance in helping us complete our risk assessment. And we also review the entity's internal controls, specifically over significant transaction cycles, business processes, and any other mitigating controls that are in place to complete our risk assessment, which we then use to determine what auditing procedures to perform over which set of transactions. Next slide, please. Significant areas of focus during the audit. This is just a brief overview of the different types of procedures that we did. We review, again, policies and procedures over all the significant areas of the financial statements. Revenue recognition is always a significant area and focus of an audit. We take a test sampling of accounts receivable and revenue. We review subsequently received cash receipts to verify those amounts, valuations, and that those transactions actually did occur. We look at cash received subsequent to year-end to vouch the validity of the accounts receivable at year-end. And we look at the revenue recognition throughout the year to make sure that one policy was used for recognizing revenue and that it was being applied consistently. Next slide, please. Some other areas of significant focus. Cash, while cash is fairly easy to calculate, it is a big part of the audit just to make sure that it's being calculated correctly and held correctly. We send confirmations to third parties to gain audit evidence that that cash does exist. Accrued cost of electricity, we look at subsequent billing, verify those payments to make sure that that is calculated correctly and is complete. And we also look at other liabilities, reviewing contracts with other suppliers. Again, the assertion that we're looking for is completeness to make sure that all the liabilities that should be recorded in the current period are recorded. And I did mention this earlier that a significant focus of the audit is reviewing the financial statement disclosures, making sure that all the required disclosures are there and that the disclosures are complete and without bias. And without bias means that if there was a disclosure that management could potentially sway or put its thumb on, we want to make sure that it's just giving the minimum required facts and that it's meeting the professional standards for the disclosures and doesn't have any additional information that could potentially persuade the reader or user of the financial statements. Next slide, please. So new for 2020 is what we call a single audit, which is basically a compliance audit that is determined by the Uniform Grant Guidance. And this is a federal, this is caused by expending $750,000 or more of federal funds. And in your instance, it was because of the CAP program, which was the coronavirus state and local recovery funds. Basically, this grant was received to help provide assistance for basically ratepayers that were unable to make their payments. And so this was provided to Silicon Valley to help offset some of those lost revenues for receivables that were not going to be collectible. Because you had a single audit in this year, we did have to perform additional tests of internal controls and tests of compliance, which again was all determined by the Uniform Grant Guidance. If you look in the financial statements, you'll see a schedule of expenditures of federal awards, which is new for this year. Again, that's a required document when you have a single audit. You'll also see a schedule of financing questions costs that has additional information over the single audit. Next slide, please. One other item that's new for this year that I wanted to specifically call out is the implementation of GASB, the Government Accounting Standards Board, statement number 87 leases. This is a new standard. It was issued a few years ago, but this is the first year that it's in effect. And the main purpose of this standard was to take operating leases, which have always been disclosed in the notes, but were not previously reported on the statement of net position. It's what we would call in the industry an off-balance sheet liability. The new standard requires that we take that liability that, again, it's a non-cancelable commitment of the organization, and we are going to put that onto the balance sheet as a intangible asset, the right to use the underlying leased asset, as well as a corresponding lease liability. And in your situation, it created a $1.3 million, again, intangible asset and a lease liability for your office lease premise. Next slide, please. Again, we're at the very tail end of the audit. We did not identify any significant or unusual transactions. This was one of the things that Brian I talked about, whether or not there was any unusual transactions or any pressure put on by management to account for transactions in a certain way, or whether or not we had any restrictions in our audit. That is not the case. We were free to ask any questions, ask for any support. In fact, I would like to specifically thank the management team and Maher and his team for all the assistance. This was a relatively quick turnaround of an audit and of a financial statement. And we could only do that with everybody staying on time and delivering high quality work. So we appreciate management's assistance in completing this audit. Next slide, please. Again, these are just more required communications to those who are charged with governance, which is this audit committee. There were no disagreements with management. As I just said, everybody was very respectful, and I appreciate all of everybody's hard work to get this done so timely. And we didn't encounter any difficulties with management during the audit. Again, these are required communications from professional standards that we communicate to those who have the oversight authority over the financial statements.
I'll just interrupt and say that this is a very important slide in what you're disclosing here. And this gives me confidence in recommending that the board of directors accept the financial statements as prepared and as opined on by Pacenti and Brinker. So I'm underscoring the importance of this and saying it's well done. Thank you.
Appreciate that. Thank you. Next, I think there's one more. I guess that is it. I'm happy to answer any questions about any of the material on the slides or anything within the financial statements, any of our procedures, any questions I'm happy to discuss.
I will open this up to the audit committee to ask questions, and then I'll ask for public comment, and then we'll go for a motion. Yeah, any questions from any of the members? Go ahead, Sheila.
My question was about, thank you, Director Mike. My question was about GASB 87. I know this is the first time it needs to be reported. So what exactly is it? So I thought I heard you say something about office space, but I didn't quite register. Is that the sole item?
Yes. If you look at footnote disclosure 11, you'll see all the related information about the lease and GASB 87. Essentially, without going into too much detail, the statement wants us to discount the cash flows that have been committed for this lease and to record a liability for that commitment, and the determination of how, if we're going to put a liability onto the balance sheet, there has to be an offset to that, and they determined that the best way to represent that is with a intangible right to use of that office space. So if you look on the statement of net position, you'll see a new financial statement line item, which is for the office lease and of the lease liability. So that amount is basically calculated as the discounted cash flows of the remaining non-cancelable portion of that lease, which again, you can see the details of the lease in disclosure 11. And I know this one's it's a little bit hairy compared to some of the other accounting treatments, but I hope that gave you a brief understanding of it without getting too nerdy.
And so this number will keep going down in the years to come?
Correct. Yes, it's going to be amortize the asset, and as the payments go out, it's going to reduce the lease liability.
Thank you.
Other questions? I have a couple questions. Could you put up the table of contents for the financial statements, please? Andrea? I think it's item 4, attachment 2 in the top right. Perfect. So I may have missed it, but is the independent auditor's report included on page 1?
It is not. It's our policy not to include drafts of our opinions, just from a quality control standpoint of, worrying that with complete drafts floating out in space, that we just for our own internal protections, it's not recommended that we send out drafts with our opinions. I can provide that to you if we need to, but again, we are issuing an unqualified opinion. Understood.
What's the date of your audit report going to be?
So that's actually a question that I have for Amarit, and it depends on, do you want us to finalize the audit before it is officially reviewed by the board, and so that you're basically approving the final audit at the board, or do you want us to wait until the board approves the draft audit and then finalize it? So we're basically ready to finalize. As I said, there's one last formatting change that we sent to Mike this morning that I assume he'll return to us today. So we can basically issue as early as tomorrow or Monday at the latest. But I wasn't sure what your preference would be as far as your policies of whether or not the board needs to approve a draft, or if they approve the final report.
I think the board can approve the final because this will be presented as a consent item, as we've done in the past.
Okay, so then if there are no changes from this committee, then I would most likely send the management representation letter later today with the report dated for tomorrow, which is the date that our opinions will have.
Good, okay, that answered my concern, question, and then looking through the, if you could just go back to that table of contents again. Which pages have we not seen? We didn't see page 1. We saw the MD&A. But then if you go down to the bottom under compliance and supplementary information, maybe Kellen, you can identify which ones have been removed.
Sure. So it's going to be the same situation as with the independent auditors reports. The report on internal controls and the report on compliance, both are considered to be audit opinions. And so we still have that same firm policy of where we traditionally don't provide draft of those opinions until we're ready to sign. Although the results that's going to be disclosed in those opinions, I did address during my presentation, essentially that there were no internal control findings and that there was no material non-compliance. So that's, again, those are going to be clean opinions. And I would like to just point out to this committee that if we were not issuing clean opinions, you would be hearing about it prior to this meeting. We would notify management immediately and notify the audit committee as quickly as possible if we were going to have material findings that would have to be reported in these reports.
Thank you. I'm just, and then we also didn't see what's on page 33 and 35. Is that correct, or did I miss it?
No, those should, if that's the case, I would apologize, but I believe those are included. Be at the very end. I think you just passed it. Up one more, I think would be, this is the schedule of financing questions cost. This is what's required when there's a single audit. And this summarizes a lot of the information that's going to be in those other two opinions that we didn't provide, basically stating that there were no material weaknesses or significant deficiencies in the financial statements. And then under the second section, the federal award section, that there were no material weaknesses or significant deficiencies. And also the federal fund that was determined to be a major program. And this is all, again, prescribed by the uniform guidance, determines this report and the information that's required to be in this report.
Good. I just wanted to make sure that you walked us through this and the audit committee knew exactly what we're seeing, what's included, and so that we can make the appropriate recommendation.
Yeah.
And then my only comment would be going for today before we do a vote, take action on this, is that I would like you to contact us immediately if there's any change in any of the opinions before they're signed off tomorrow.
Yeah, I can assure you there'll be no changes to the opinions. There'll be no changes to the draft report that you're looking at right now, other than, I believe, two very, very minor, one misspelling and one change of a date for formatting purposes. There are no significant changes in any way between this report and the report that we're going to be issuing.
Good, thank you very much. So I'm now going to, are there any more questions from the audit committee before I open it for public comment? No? Then I will open public comment. If any member of the public would like to make a comment, please raise your virtual hand. Seeing none, I will close public comment, and you're confirming that, or clerk is confirming that.
Yes, confirmed.
So item 4, we have to take action on this. I would be looking for a motion, please.
I move to accept the audit report from Pecenti and Brinker.
I'll second that.
And recommend this to the SVCE board. Okay, we have a motion and a second. May we have a roll call vote, please?
Yes, thank you. Chair Makachuk,
Aye.
Vice Chair Mohan,
Aye.
Committee Member Sangha.
Aye.
Thank you. That motion carries with Directors Lopez and Srinivasan absent.
Thank you. With that, I think we're done on item 4. And is there anything else that we need our external auditors to attend for? That's one for you.
Sorry, I just want to say thank you very much for your time and the questions today.
Okay.
Thank you, Colin.
Thank you. With that, we'll move to item 5, which is a discussion on IT and automated meter infrastructure audit update. Over to you, Amrit or Kevin.
Thank you, Chair Makachuk. Good afternoon, directors and committee members. This is an overview of our IT audit and assessment efforts. They focus on that big hairy word you see there, cybersecurity. So we've included that in the title. And we'll tell you a little bit about the work we do here at SVCE and how that's audited and assessed. Next slide, please. So in our strategic plan, goal 17 is what you see there in blue, which is ensure SVCE's information technology infrastructure is secure, reliable, and disaster resilient to provide 24/7, 365 online access. And that's a big, broad goal, but it really does, I think, capture our overall IT philosophy. And that helps set the stage for the efforts that we take to make sure that we're doing a good job at that, to audit it and assess our progress. All of those supporting bullet points that you see underneath there represent efforts that SVCE staff have undertaken or are undertaking. And we'll touch on a few of those today as they relate to auditing and assessing our overall cybersecurity posture. So our goal today is really to give you an overview of that. Some of this will be a refresher for Director Makachuk, but perhaps new for Director Mohan and Council or Committee Member Sangha. And one caveat to this is that as this is a Brown Acted public meeting, we're going to be speaking about these things at a pretty high level. We do have some additional data in the appendices of this report that we can refer to if there are questions and that you may refer to on your own later. But more than that, we are always available for individual questioning. So if there's any question about how we're responding to risks, what our roadmap is, the actions that we're planning to take, please feel free to contact us, and we'd be happy to discuss in detail. Next slide, please. So as Amrit mentioned in his introductory presentation, there are a number of different audits and assessments that we conduct and have conducted over the years. The two in blue at the top are the two that we're currently engaged in this year. The two in lighter blue at the bottom are those that we've completed recently and are not on our sort of most current work plan for the moment. And let me talk a little bit about those. I know Amrit spoke about them as well. In the upper left corner, due the soonest, is an annual update to the CPUC. It's a data privacy report that we submit every year on AMI, or Advanced Metering Infrastructure data. And that's our customer data that comes from the meters. It's a compliance filing. We do it every year. We last submitted it in April 22, and we'll do it again this year. It's the annual update to what Amrit mentioned is a much bigger and broader 3-year triennial cycle of audits. And that's this full AMI audit that occurred most recently in April 22 and will occur again in 2025. Again, it focuses on customer data privacy. It's a compliance effort that we undertake, and there's more details in the appendix if there are any questions. On the right column are more of what you would consider, traditional or overall IT assessments and audits. The current one that we'll tell you more about in terms of our roadmap in later slides is the security assessment, and that's the next audit that we'll be doing for our IT posture. We'll do an update to that in late 2023, and I say update because we completed the full audit, or the full assessment, I should say, in late 2022. And this is really a view of the landscape of cybersecurity overall, taking a look at the threats that are out there, the gaps in our systems and our technologies, in our policies and in our human efforts, and a chance to really help us prioritize what we do going forward to help address and remediate those. The fourth audit, or the fourth type of audit, I should say, in the lower right corner is what's called an IT audit. And it's a pretty plain vanilla term for kind of the core audit overall, which is an audit that takes a look at your existing systems and essentially sees how well they're operating. Fairly akin to a financial audit and looking at what's there, how well you're executing and running those systems, and whether there are any patches or remediations needed. SVCE has traditionally done that on an annual basis, and we did it all the way through 2022. And then we combined that audit with the security assessment in late 2022. So we're currently on pause for that. And as we get to the security assessment update in late 2023, we'll reassess whether that can be conducted coincidentally with the security assessment or is handled separately again. And again, there's some detailed information in the appendix slides about the timing and the types of information included in those audits. But moving on to the next slide. So just a quick bit of highlight on some of the improvements we've made over the past couple of years. These are a little bit more plain English, so hopefully they're all very understandable. We've worked to improve our management of login credentials. So that includes things like logins and passwords. We've worked to implement new tools to monitor all of the laptops and devices that are on our networks. And that includes both in the office and obviously remotely, as we've been working for the past few years. We've improved and increased the frequency of backup coverage of all of our SVCE data. We've improved and implemented accelerated system updates using patching tools. And then on the softer side, we've also worked with our outside counsel, Richards, Watson, and Gershon, to update the contract terms regarding data breaches and responsibility within our standard contract templates. So we've been trying to take a pretty holistic view at sort of where our risks lie. And then in 2022, we expanded upon that. This was the year that we did the security assessment, and we started some of these efforts in parallel to that. One of which was increasing the frequency and complexity of our staff training. We'll talk a little bit about this towards the end of this presentation, but obviously our staff comprise what we call the human firewall, which is a big element of how we keep ourselves protected. I mentioned that full security assessment. We'll speak more about it in a moment. But we also conducted a cybersecurity stress test. As Amrit noted earlier, possibly before the meeting started, we're engaged in financial stress testing to really understand what changes in market conditions can do to our financial standing. We added a cybersecurity scenario to really understand what impacts there would be if we suffered a cybersecurity event. Speaking of those events, as part of the ongoing assessment work, we developed and completed an incident response plan. So that's really a plan that we have on hand that we can pull out. It has individual event playbooks, and each of those correspond to a different type of event that might happen. And it's the type of thing that we want to be able to refer to should something happen in the future. It's only as good as our familiarity with it. So Nick and I both together with an outside vendor conducted a tabletop exercise using this plan and these playbooks. And we did that in December. And so that's something that's going to become an annual exercise. And then finally, to help tie all these efforts together, we selected last year a virtual chief information security officer, or VCISO, And this outside resource is really helping us to prioritize our future improvements as were identified in the roadmap that came out of the security assessment. So next slide, please. So what does this all mean? How safe are we really? As part of the security assessment and with the help of the VCSO, we have graded ourselves on a scorecard. And this is a scorecard that uses a industry standard framework called NIST, and that's noted at the bottom. It comes from the National Institute for Standards and Technology, along with some other proprietary factors that the outside vendor uses. And we get a score, and our score as of this assessment was 628. So the question, of course, is what does that mean? Well, it's a number, and there's the scale. It goes from 300 all the way to 850. But I think it's most useful to talk about it in relation to overall scores in our industry, and then where we're hoping to go from here. So it's a fair score, and there's some improvement that we can be made there, but it's not bad for a small firm. And compared to our peers, it's in line with them. That difference between 628 and 635 is about a 1% increase in risk, relatively speaking. And that utility industry average is not just CCAs, of course. It's CCAs and investor-owned utilities and large players in the utility and energy sector. So that's a much bigger arena than just us. As a firm with roughly 40 staff, we don't have quite the same resources that a PG&E or a Constellation might have, but we're definitely doing our best to identify gaps and address those. And with that in mind, we've set the short-term goal of reaching that next tier, that blue tier you can see, which is good. And in conversation with our VCSO, we think that's both a good short-term goal, as well as one that's really achievable. And we'll talk about the next steps in the roadmap in a couple slides. After we've hit that point later this year, we're going to reassess. That'll be part of the update to the security assessment later this year. And we'll take a look at really where our ultimate target lies. As you can see, that scale goes all the way up to 850. But I think we're going to need to really understand where the marginal value is in some of those, smaller, further improvements, especially in terms of staff time and cost to implement them. And then we'll talk about some risks that we may need to just accept and decide that are not mitigatable. And we'll talk about that in the context of the next slide. So next slide, please. So just a little bit about the categories. We didn't want to go into gory detail. Again, there's more detail in the appendices, but the categories cover both the technical side of things in the left column. So IT controls internally, external controls that provide a security perimeter. But again, some more of the softer things like IT policies and the human part of information security. And then finally, physical controls. So how do we protect information in our suite in the building? And that's where I wanted to mention the comment that I made about being able to sort of accept certain risks. This is a pretty thorough security assessment, and it even addresses things like vehicles ramming buildings. Does our building have security barriers that prevent vehicles from ramming the building? That's a risk where we might identify that as a third floor tenant of a leased building, there's not a lot we can do to prevent that. We'll speak with the landlord, but I'm not sure that implementing pop-up barriers is in their long-term plan. So that might be one where we determine there's a minimal risk and we're willing to accept that. But I wanted to provide an example of kind of what that might mean. I'm going to give an opportunity right now to our manager of technology and admin services, Nick Zanato, to just speak a little bit more about that left column, which are the sort of technical aspects, and is very much in his wheelhouse. Nick, would you be able to say something about that for a moment?
Sure. On the IT controls part, we do a lot of these things daily, but it's just not being policized or with a control in place. So the security assessment really has identified ways that we can strengthen those, make sure, yeah, we're doing the work, but then also it's documented, it's controlled, so it's automated. So that really focuses on those types of things, and that's more for the internal hardware stuff like servers, firewalls, making sure logs are being captured and monitored, stuff like that, stuff that we could easily automate and to put into a policy. On the external technical controls, those are more stuff that is protecting the environment from the outside. So making sure firewalls set up to so we block intrusions from happening. That's pretty much, if you're inside of a building, inside of the office, ways to protect that environment. Then also the hard part is, now that we're hybrid, how do we protect everybody's home office as well, right? So we're really working on strengthening those elements as well. And with the security assessment, it's actually guiding us on ways to improve that posture as well.
Thank you, Nick. I should have said earlier, I apologize if I didn't. If you have any questions, please stop us at any time. We'd be happy to discuss in more detail or jump to the appendices as needed. But not seeing any hands at the moment, we'll continue on to the next slide. And as I mentioned earlier, along with the technology and hardware side of things, there really is the quote unquote software side, or the human side. So this idea of a human firewall is one that we've really tried hard to lean into. And it starts all the way up at the beginning of hiring, where Nick and Girish both meet with new hires to impress upon them the importance of maintaining this human firewall and treating cybersecurity as an ongoing need for not just staff on the finance and admin team, but all of our staff. Nick's been an integral part of that, providing trainings and testing. So I'm going to let him say a little bit more about that for the moment.
Sure, thank you, Kevin. So the human firewall is the most important part of your network security for any organization. Statistics show anywhere up to 80% of all breaches are happening because of a human. So either a phishing email, a reused password, or something like that. So we really have invested this last year, especially on ramping up our cybersecurity trainings. So we do a module once or twice a month from an outside vendor that talks about anything from reusing passwords to home networks to public Wi-Fi, right? So whatever we think is important at that time, we're going to train on it. We also do a monthly cyber training led by Kevin and myself. And we're talking about internal things that we're doing, external issues that are happening like in the real world, just for awareness. So we're trying to improve the cyber culture, making everybody comfortable in their role, but then also having a platform to share their issues or share their own, their own breaches or stuff that they've been a part of, right? So we want the culture to be, it's not bad to talk about it, be a part of it, because everybody has to know their role to enforce our security posture, right? We've ramped up our phishing tests. So we send a monthly phishing test, phishing email. They were pretty easy for a long time, but now we made them harder. So it actually looks at your mailbox, what you're working on, and it'll try to phish you with something. So like if you're a person, you're going to get a finance phish type of mail. And we do that like 4 times a week. So just the more you question things, the better your role on the human firewall is going to be. We look at password health. All right, so we have a password manager. We look and make sure passwords aren't being reused. They're not compromised. They're not weak. So a lot of the big breaches that happened this last year, like at Uber and a few others, were because of password reuses. So we really want employees to take it more than just your passwords at work. It should be passwords everywhere. So your personal passwords are just as important. So we really ramped up the efforts. Human firewall, again, the most important part of your cyber posture is making sure everybody in the organization is playing their role and understands their role.
I'll interrupt and just make a comment that I can't believe the number of phishing attempts that I get through my emails, both my city of Monte Sereno and then also my personal. It's just, you got to look for those little spelling mistakes and where's the email coming from and all kinds of things. So I'm glad to see that the effort that's being put into this, because this is super important from a security perspective. So just wanted to make that comment. Continue on.
Yeah, we've invested in a lot of tools that blocks probably 4,000 or 5,000 messages a month from getting into our mailboxes. But phishing emails do get through, right? And so that's why we have we made it a very big part of our security training is to, we can block 95% of the phishing emails coming in, but it only takes one email to get through and somebody to actually follow up on that email, right? And then there's a breach. So tools only do so much, right? It does a lot, but awareness and staff involvement, security culture, all these parts of the human firewall is, I can't stress enough, it is the most important tool that we could have in any cyber security posture.
And then I'll leave this slide with just the point that Nick made, that this is ongoing, and all the work that we do towards it is great, but we need to revisit that, both because the types of phishing attempts and email compromises are always changing and adapting, but also because we're having changes in staffing, and because we want staff to be refreshed and not get complacent about it. So one of the things, I think that's important that we've developed is, I think a culture where we actually share this. People feel comfortable saying, hey, this happened to me, or, Nick succeeded, he phished me with that test. Or, hey, did anyone else get this strange email that came from Gurish? So, that's a good thing. By talking about it, we're more aware. So next slide, please. In addition to all that ongoing work on the human firewall, we are, of course, undertaking other efforts, largely in coordination with the vCISO, having prioritized a number of those remediations at the beginning of this year. We'll be spending the next couple quarters implementing, and that includes increasing protections, as Nick hinted or alluded to. Working from home is a different structure than working from the office, so we're changing our tools to meet those needs. We're bringing on board an external partner, a managed service provider, that will help increase the coverage and support we have in off hours and at times when, Nick is not 100% available, so that we have coverage then. And then finally, beyond that, we're looking to increase our protections, out just from our laptops to mobile devices. We're looking to update IT policies that may have gotten a little bit stale over the last couple of years. And then our goal really is to integrate our overall sort of IT recovery and continuity plans with a broader business continuity and recovery plan. So that's on the docket for this year as well. And, kind of going back to that scorecard that I showed and mentioned earlier, these are the steps that we see here in the next couple of quarters that will get us to that 660 good goal. And that's where we'll kind of take a pause and reassess and see where we can go from there.
Quick question on the integrating a new managed service provider for increased coverage and support. Could you just provide a little bit more color on that, please? Like, that's a third party. What are they doing?
Yeah, so right now we've integrated with them to get additional security tools. For one, we don't have the buying power to get into some of these tools that we want because we're so small. But buying it through like an MSP, we're able to get into some of these better price points, and just being able to get the tools. But the most important thing is just getting more eyes and expertise on these higher level problems that we may face. So if we have a ransomware machine that happens at 2 o'clock in the morning, we'll have eyes that immediately see that. Like it generates a ticket, and then somebody's going to be watching that at 2 o'clock in the morning, being able to jump on it. Where if it's just me, I may not see it until 8 o'clock in the morning, and it might already have done damage. So just the main part for me was just getting the extra layer of expertise, the more eyes available, and then a bonus, I think, is just getting some additional tools that we're able to get into now than we weren't before.
Can you share the name of who that is, or is that not appropriate?
Kevin, I'll defer. Yeah.
I think we can say that it's a firm we've had a long work history with on past IT audits. So we appreciate their assistance and would be, happy to talk more offline.
Thank you.
Next slide. So, oh, there we go. So that really sort of spells out where we've been, where we are, a bit of where we're going. As I mentioned, we'd be happy to talk in probably gorier detail than you might want at any time. So please, feel free to approach us. Let us know of any questions about specifics of any of the tools or tests that we're doing. We're definitely available to speak. Any other questions for the moment, though?
Doesn't look like there's any questions. I asked mine as you were going through. What I'd like to do, if there are no questions, just open it for public comment on this. And for that, if there's any member of the public that would like to make a comment on this, item 5, please raise your virtual hand. I don't see any hands raised. Do you?
No hands raised, Chair.
I will close public comment and ask if there's any final comments on this before we close out item 5. I thank you very much for the comprehensive presentation, and I think that you're going to get to your number. It looks like you've got a path to get there, so that's a good thing. And I understand, the incremental cost versus what the incremental benefit is of going over 660 is to be determined, but at a point you reach diminishing returns. So that's good that you've got your eye on that. With that, I think I'll close item 5. And then we'll go to committee and staff remarks. Committee remarks, anything from the audit committee?
No, I have no comments.
No comments from my end. Thank you.
Thank you. Staff remarks.
The only thing I'll add is that this committee has to meet at least twice a year. And normally we meet at this time to approve the audit, and then in September timeframe to kick off the audit. Last year we met 3 times because we were also selecting a new audit partner. So I just want to let you know that most likely we'll have a meeting in September to kick off next year's financial audit. That'll be our second meeting. Of course, the committee can meet as often as necessary, and if there's need, we will convene a meeting.
Okay.
Okay.
That sounds good. We can note that in our planning calendars for September 2023. I have no further remarks. With that, we are adjourned at 1:48 p.m. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.